Do that beat drop. Welcome back into the Wolves Den. Jay Burr with you here like we always are. Twitter handle, there you go. Follow it. It's the greatest Twitter handle out there. Let's get into things right here. You know, it's always good to come back into the Den here after a win. South Alabama there on homecoming. And really, it's opening kickoff here. And this set the tone right here. Blah! Boy, don't mess with him. Man, and that was just going to be that kind of day for South Alabama, at least early on in this one. Defense was swarming early in this one, and really, in my opinion, that really set the tone to things here. A lot of energy, a lot of things going on there. Here you go, one of the plays of the week. Ooh! Don't try to tackle that man low. That's Kirk Merritt there on the hurdle here. He would bounce back later on that drive. Boom, first touchdown. Now, it's second quarter. It took things a little while to get rolling for both of these teams here. Malik Stanley here on the 17-yard pass from Evan Orth would answer right back. So you're thinking, oh, man, here we go. Another track meet. But another one of these fantastic plays. Justin McInnis going up and getting it. And then look at that man. They're just ballet dancing with him. Spin cycles, gets it down there. Now, this is key right here. Warren Wan's going to punch this thing in. Right at the end of the first half, Red Wolves would get it back to open the second half. A little trickery right here. Go up and get it, Justice Hanson. Woo! And pass interference. Name another quarterback doing that kind of thing here. Later on in the drive, would finish things off here. Javonis Isaac there, they would review that, would be a thing. Now, McInnis here had him a game. You saw the highlight reel earlier. Boom. Rattles off a big time 78-yard touchdown right there. Perfect throw. If you saw that on replay, man, it was right behind him. Perfect placement. Justice Hanson would, in essence, finish things off here for the Red Wolves there on the 2-yard run. And really, it was just a rough day out there for South Alabama. And it was homecoming. It had better have been a rough day. They broke out the black and the red. And that's just all she wrote here. Throw the stats up there for me, guys. We've got plenty to kind of review here. A lot to look into this game. In fact, offense got rolling. We said last week that thing's got to get rolling. 354 yards passing, only 155 yards rushing. For South Al, they couldn't do much of anything. You see there, only 93 yards passing, 156 yards rushing. And we said you got to contain Evan Orth. They did just that. Third downs were also key in this one. Both sides of the ball for the Red Wolves. They did their job, going 50%, held USA to 3 of 16. You're not going to have a lot of drives in this one. In fact, they had 6 3-and-outs in this game. That's pretty unheard of in most of the time, but hats off to the D there. Like I said, contained Evan Orth, didn't do really much of anything. You see there, only 63 yards, had the 1 touchdown pass, a little bit of running there. Trey Minter, another one of these guys, we said, hey, you got to watch out for this guy. Only 88 yards, solid day, but really was never much of a threat. And then Jamarius Way, one of the leading receivers in all the Sun Belt, 1 catch, 5 yards, had that touchdown. It was kind of a garbage time TD. And there you go. I alluded to the 6 3-and-outs on 13 total drives. It kind of had one towards the end of the first half. It was just a one-play sort of kneel it out. So I'm not going to really count that one. But when just about half your drives are 3-and-outs, defense, hey, they came in and they did their thing. So where does that leave us in the standings? Well, Arkansas State still trying to handle business, still trying to climb out of that hole. Throw it up there for me, Steve. I got the standings there. Louisiana Monroe still leading the way. There we go. They're sitting at 3-2, 5-4 overall, looking for bowl eligibility. Arkansas State right there behind them. Lafayette, boy, they took one on the chin this past week, so a little bit of a surprise there. You see Texas State and South Alabama bringing up the rear. You're looking at potentially 3 bowl-eligible teams there out of the Western Division. Could get a little dicey. A lot of these teams are going to start meeting up with each other. In fact, I mentioned bowl eligibility. You see Monroe and Arkansas State there on the cusp of it. Let's see what some of the projections are throwing up for Arkansas State. You see there the Cure Bowl versus Tulane there from ESPN. The Dollar General Bowl also projecting them as well there versus Northern Illinois. How about the Arizona Bowl versus Fresno State? Now that would be a juicy matchup. That's what CBS has them as. A couple more here. Go ahead and flip them there for me, fellas. Another appearance by the Cure Bowl there. Same game, Tulane, Yahoo. Now this one here would be something else. Cure Bowl versus Memphis. That's what SB Nation has. And then our good friends down there in North Texas, the New Orleans Bowl, there USA Today is projecting. So a lot of really interesting matchups. Again, you know, nothing really concrete yet. You're seeing a lot of Cure Bowl there. Not really sure how they're going to work that out because there's going to be a lot of Eastern teams that are a little more high-powered, but the Cure Bowl is 4th in the pecking order in terms of the bowls. So we'll just kind of have to see how things work out because, those offense and those defense from App State, Troy, obviously the Alabama Bowls are going to want them. Yeah, so a lot still yet to be determined, but it's always kind of fun to look ahead and see at the potential matchups here. All right, bring in a good friend of ours, Chris Hutchinson there from KAIT up in Let me get out the way here there. All right, my man's representing from KAIT. How you doing this morning, brother?
Not too bad. Like you said, it's always a whole lot easier to cover A-State after a win, after a couple of these losses that had the fan base picking up their pitchforks and such. So
yeah,
another pivotal game coming up this weekend with easily the longest road trip of the season, over 800 miles, going to Conway, South Carolina to face the Chanticleers.
Chanticleers. We want to make that clear. It's the Chanticleers. I know it looks like chant, shant. Hutch, let me get your take on what you saw this past week. I mean, they were able to dominate that game. Now, offensively, it took them a little bit to sort of get rolling. What did you see, and why were they trying things a little differently early on, or was it just a matter of, South Alabama does have a pretty decent defense?
It was a matter of, as it's been a lot of times this season for the Red Wolves, the defensive line and the secondary, everything kind of falls into place. If they get things done on the D-line, everything seems to take care of itself for the Red Wolves. And, one person I definitely wanted to spotlight was in the secondary was Jerry Jacobs, a sophomore cornerback, where I can kind of remember the beginning in fall practice, he and the coaching staff are butting heads, and now he's just blossomed into a lockdown corner. You mentioned Jamarius Way, 1 catch, 5 yards. Big reason of that was Jerry Jacobs holding him down and defending him just fantastically the entire course of the ball game. Now, offensively, it kind of starts and ends with Justin McInnis. Granted, Justice Hanson was the one throwing it to him, but at one point in the game, Justin McInnis had more receiving yards than South Alabama had entire total offense at one point in the ball game. McInnis finished with 7 grabs for 177, and of course that 78-yard touchdown that you mentioned. So those are the two things that really stood out to me in that South Alabama win. The play of Jerry Jacobs locking down one of the best wide receivers in the Sun Belt, and Justin McInnis showing why he is one of the best receivers in the Sun Belt Conference.
Absolutely. And we did mention that last week with Joel Cox there, Red Wolf Roll Call up there, about, Jerry Jacobs, he is the guy now in that secondary, and he's going to be the one guy that gets put on everybody's best receiver. And like you mentioned, I mean, he has blossomed. How have you seen him grow into that lockdown cornerback role as we've gone throughout the season?
It's kind of that whole, he's gotten better every week. You hear that all the time and think, okay, that's a cliche, but it really is the case with Jerry Jacobs. He's really improved every single week this season. No, you flash back even before the South Alabama game, he had a pivotal interception against Louisiana that led to the go-ahead touchdown. Granted, the Cajuns ended up winning the game, but did A-State's kind of comeback there wouldn't have happened without Jerry Jacobs' interception. And even during fall camp, you kind of saw glimpses of, okay, they may be onto something, having another component there in the secondary to kind of pair him up with B.J. Edmonds on the other side of the field.
Yeah.
And now you're kind of noticing every single week he's gotten a little bit better. And, he mentioned after the win, South Alabama win, he said, I kind of had to trust myself and then trust the coaching staff before taking that next step as a player, and you're seeing all the dividends of that so far this season.
Absolutely. I mean, the guy has really started to make a name for himself, and it's still, you mentioned, he's only a sophomore, so we got a couple more years of him here. On the offensive side, Justin McInnis, and in this game, it's not like these were easy catches for him, a couple of those either. I mean, even on the big touchdown, he kind of had to reach around behind him, not to mention, he had a defender on the front side of him, and then we had that, that crazy spin reception that he had there towards the end of the first half. This receiving core has kind of taken their lumps this year, and now granted, they've had some problems getting open, but that's also sort of a product of, some of the best guys have been out. We talk about Kendrick Edwards, they lost Dahu Green in the second quarter of the year. What has he done specifically? And then obviously Kirk Merritt and him are sort of leading the way. Kind of bring both those guys in here as to what have they done here the past couple of weeks to really set themselves apart and kind of, they're the ones that are starting to kind of get going, at least from a wide receiver standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, in Blake Anderson's scheme, you need a deep threat. You need a possession guy. We've already seen how much possession has worked in the receiving component with Kirk Merritt and just a fantastic season he's had in his first season with the Red Wolves. Granted, I saw him a little bit at Last Chance U, aka East Mississippi Community College, and the talent he showed there with the Lions, he's definitely shown with the Red Wolves. And for a deep threat, it's one question I had even going as far back as the Alabama game where you didn't see many deep balls at all, and now you're kind of noticing more and more and more A-State taking advantage of one of the greatest advantages they have over a lot of teams is just the sheer height they have at the wide receiver position. You mentioned Justin McInnis, another good thing to be on the lookout for this week. Jonathan Adams was banged up, didn't play at practice yesterday, didn't have a red on Wednesday, didn't have a red jersey or a green jersey at practice. So that's a great sign moving forward for A-State, just getting more health in the wide receiver core. Kendrick Edwards day to day, he's kind of, I think it would be a game time decision against Coastal Carolina, but getting more help in terms of height, not just having just Justin McInnis as the only deep threat. You're going to need different guys there to at least help for Justice Hansen, and can't just have Kirk Merritt dinking and dunking with 5-10 yard carries, 5-10 yard catches all the time. You're going to need some deep threats to beat Coastal and to at least get a huge road win.
And I guess from what you've seen, you mentioned the deep threats, and that's one thing we just didn't see at all. And that App State game immediately comes to mind because it just seemed like there was just a lot of side-to-side type passes, not even really the dink and dunk type. I mean, it was really just try to get your guys into space, but now we're seeing this vertical game, and it's really changed the whole dynamic. And I think we've seen that too with the evolution of the rushing game. The introduction of Marcel Murray to the world of, we're kind of seeing defenses loosen up a little bit. Is that kind of what you've noticed, or is it just a matter of guys are finally starting to make plays and this coaching staff has a little more confidence in what receivers they do have going downfield?
It's a little bit of everything there.
All right.
Where I can remember, I know you can, the beginning of the season where we saw every screen pass known to man. Now we're not seeing as many screen passes. We are, because that's an important component of the offense and just kind of how they stretch the defense. But mixing in the deep threat and now knowing, okay, if we've got that kind of that short to intermediate passing game, we kind of have that locked in with Kirk Merritt. And now you mentioned the running game, which was fascinating to watch because Marcel Murray was banged up for most of the game.
Yeah.
I think with a shoulder ailment, it was one of his worst rushing performances of the season after he had back-to-back 100-yard games. But he had meaningful carries when you needed to, and then you pair that up with the job Warren Wan has done, being a pass-catching threat, and then what he's done in the run game too. You're kind of seeing a little bit of everything now, which is what we kind of all expected with Blake Anderson's offense going into the season, where you should have multiple threats. Now you had points during the season where you either didn't see it because Alabama did Alabama things, or App State did kind of App State things and just how they were able to contain. But now, I'm sure folks will say, okay, it's a component of the opponents they've been playing these last couple weeks in the schedule, which it's the Sun Belt. You got to play who's in front of you. But A-State has been able to now kind of show at least the full breadth of their offense. It doesn't matter who the opponent is. Kind of need to win to at least get back in the whole Sun Belt championship picture anyway.
Absolutely, Harry. And I guess, too, a couple of things. One thing I've noticed here was it's been the discipline the past few weeks. That's something we harped on a lot at the beginning of the year. 3 penalties, 15 yards. I mean, even in sort of what was a physical, dicey game for a while, you didn't see anybody losing their heads. And even last week against Lafayette, not really a whole lot in terms of penalties. I want to say it was like 6 for 60 yards, kind of give or take on that, maybe even less than that. But, what have you seen, or has there been something that head coach Blake Anderson's been stressing about those penalties? Because at the beginning of the year, I mean, it was a legitimate problem. And now, here we are, 3 penalties, and that's it.
Yeah, I could just remember, goodness, the beginning of the season, every single time they had a Monday press conference, we wanted to keep a running tally of how many times he said the word penalties or mistakes, and it just seemed like he ran out of numbers to count. The best way to describe that. But now, even the last couple weeks, even the Georgia State game, you kind of notice fewer and fewer penalties. Still a little bit too many, but that was another thing I noticed. Like while shooting the South Alabama game, I was kind of thinking at the back of my head, I was like, yeah, we haven't seen too many yellow hankies today. And the fact that you get your final box score and you notice it was only 3 in a Sun Belt West elimination game, and a game you needed to have. Hey, a pretty good time to have the cleanest football you can play all season, and you're going to need it again against Coastal Carolina, and then especially 2 weeks from now when ULM comes to town. But that matchup may be moot if you don't beat the Chanticleers, and one of the ways you have to beat them is you got to play clean football. And when we're thinking of rushing attacks in the Sun Belt Conference, everybody comes to mind, of course, Georgia Southern with the option. Well, the Chanticleers are second in the Sun Belt in rushing yards, so you're going to have to stop the run to have a shot of beating them. Containing their run game's critical. Best way of doing that is making sure you don't get the refs' eyeballs too much on holding penalties and things like that. So clean football is going to be critical on Saturday. I
like that. Segue in next week. Arkansas State heading to Conway, South Carolina, taking on the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers. I feel like you got to say it like that. It's kind of a fancy-looking word here. All right, let's break down a couple keys here, because I know you mentioned one there with the penalties, because they're also one of the fewest penalized teams in the country. But I really think that this Arkansas State defensive line really needs to put a stamp on this game. And in fact, Coastal, they allow a lot of sacks, and they allow a lot of tackles for loss, and that's kind of something that the Arkansas State defense feasts upon. In fact, they've got one of the leaders in both those categories, in tackles for loss and in sacks forced. What do you think this defensive line really needs to do? Because that rushing attack is going to be, they're going to get theirs, is basically what I'm trying to say too.
This should play right into Raheem Bingham's wheelhouse. You mentioned he leads the Sun Belt in tackles for loss and sacks, and it's a homecoming for him. He's from Bennettsville, South Carolina. That's about 90 minutes north of Conway. So expect a whole bunch of Raheem's family to be there to watch him on Saturday. He just got named a finalist, actually, for an award not many people have heard of, the Blanchard Rogers Trophy. It goes to South Carolina's top collegiate football player. That includes schools in-state or out-of-state. And, a past winner of this award is Houston Texans quarterback Deshaun Watson. So wins this, it'll be pretty tall company. But Bingham has played fantastic the entire season. He's been one of the keys of that defensive line. You've got Merrill, you've got Thurman, you've got guys in there that can really disrupted the quarterback all season long. And there have been a couple games, there have been exceptions. The App State game comes to mind, but even the loss against Georgia Southern that I can distinctly remember, if the Eagles weren't breaking out those explosive 20 to 30 to 40 yard runs, they were getting stopped at the line of scrimmage. And so you've got a Coastal Carolina team that runs a spread version of the option. And Blake Anderson's mentioned that they come out in just about every formation you could think of. Yeah. So that kind of approach will be critical. It should be huge for the defensive line. I expect a big game out of them on Saturday with the work Raheem Bingham has done all season, and he's going to be motivated. Hometown
absolutely.
Game, probably the closest game he's going to play in his career to his hometown. So I expect big things out of him.
Absolutely, and two, they run kind of, it's a funky sort of misdirection kind of option. It's not like your traditional triple option where it's you're reading a lot of things. I mean, they're spinning around in the backfield, they're sending guys in motion. It's wild. But I think too, one of the things you have to do is slow down the opposing defensive line, because those guys are no slouches either. In fact, Jeffrey Gunter right up there in terms of sacks and tackles for loss with Raheem Bingham. In fact, he's fourth in terms of sacks, and he's tied with 13.5 tackles for loss with Raheem Bingham. Sterling Johnson also getting in the backfield, and then Teron Jackson. So that front four for the Chanticleer is also pretty formidable.
Yeah, it is. I mean, one of the things we've noticed these last couple of weeks, all the success the A-State's had on offense, well, a big component of that is keeping Justice Hanson upright. The offensive line has done a great job of just being able to protect 15 at all costs and the running game, and just giving him time to be able to distribute the football. And it's been kind of a revolving door, so to speak, on who's been in and out of the line. They've played more than a few guys, either because of injury or just because of whatever the situation is in the game. And, some of these guys they've thrown in, they're getting thrown, so to speak, on the name of the show. They've been thrown to the wolves, so to speak. So having, even as young as freshmen, sophomores, and some juniors that haven't played that much, now playing key minutes, so to speak, for the A-State offensive line. Protection's going to be absolutely vital on Saturday. And we saw, a great example of that against South Alabama. You give Hampton enough time and enough protection, and he could do some damage. So it'll be another tall task for it'll be another key task for the A-State offensive line coming up on Saturday.
Absolutely, and also a key thing that they have to do, run the ball. This is a team that will allow a lot of rushing yards. In fact, they allow 224 a game. That puts them way down the list of teams here. They also allow a lot of points as well, which kind of plays into Arkansas State. They like to be explosive and all of that. They're allowing a little over 31 a game. Now, their pass defense isn't too shabby, only allowing 217 yards a game. That puts them right smack and dab in the middle in terms of rankings in the country. So what do you think that this team has to do? Is it one of these things where they maybe throw the ball a little more just to test that secondary out, or is this a thing where we saw Georgia State eat them up on the ground, we've seen Troy eat them up on the ground, or is this thing where it's like, hey, everybody's already kind of giving you the formula to beat these guys, go ahead and do that too?
I would go more of a balanced approach to try to beat Coastal, because if you go straight pass happy, then there's no point of just defending the run. I think you're going to have to balance things out. So a lot of it's going to depend on the health of Marcel Murray, where we've seen in a lot of A-State successes this year where they've had multiple guys run the football, not just one guy. So if you have Wand, Wayway, and Murray, a three-headed attack, and all three do different things very, very well, if you have that's going to stretch the defense out even more, which will at least allow you more options in the passing game, not just McInnes and Merritt. I think another big key is getting that third reliable option in terms of wide receiver, where we kind of know now McInnes and Merritt are going to get their touches, are going to get their catches. Can they get a third wide receiver out there to get big catches? Where we saw the Georgia State game a while back, where Jonathan Adams was a guy. He had a big touchdown catch. Now, can they do the same thing there? In a vital road game, you need to have it to set up essentially a Sun Belt West Championship game part 2 against ULM. So I think you're going to need that balance on offense to have a shot at another road win, where we'll go even far back to Tulsa. You saw a lot of balance there, where they used the run game to finish the game off, but they had critical passes there to beat the Golden Hurricane, which seemed like a million years ago. But a lot of things you can kind of take from that game, you can apply on Saturday.
And what about Javonis Isaac? He had kind of emerged as sort of that tight end threat. We know he's an excellent run blocker, but he started to really kind of blossom into a bit of a pass catcher. We've seen him bust a couple long ones the past few weeks. I know he kind of got dinged up this past game. Kind of what's his status going into Conway?
Last I've heard, he is questionable with a thigh bruise, and so if that happens, you're going to see freshman Reed Tyler in the fold, and they also have a walk-on that played last week against South Alabama that Blake Anderson mentioned there. So seeing even more new faces there at tight end, and if you see a couple catches or two, which that's what I'm kind of expecting there. I think Reed Tyler, I believe, had a catch against South Al. So if you see that there, it's going to be more of a pass blocking role and run protection. You may see them being targeted, a couple times in the entire ball game, but they'll be more on the pass run protection. And but Javonis has had definitely had some glimpses. Had great season so far. Actually had the record-breaking reception for Justice Hampton. He had the most passing touchdowns in A-State history. So Isaac has definitely made an impact, and he was a guy even at the beginning of the season. Offensive coordinator Buster Faulkner pinpointed as a guy that he kind of felt would have a big season, and he's definitely done that so far. Doing
it well. We've kind of harped on this a lot throughout the year, but I think it's still a key here in this one, that red zone offense. Got to score when you get it in there. I think that Arkansas State's been a lot better as the season has progressed. But for Coastal Carolina, they get in the red zone, chances are they score. 26 out of 30 on the year. That's an 86.7% clip. They allow a lot, though, as well. They're 24 of 30 allowing teams to score. So, pretty good in terms of, the percentages. But if you get in there, you got to score touchdowns. In fact, both these teams have 20 red zone touchdowns on the year. And, Chris, how have you seen not only just the red zone offense evolve as the years goes on? Because I think initially at the beginning of the year, you could almost just trot Blake Grupe out there on second down because it just seemed like they couldn't get a push, or this offense likes to spread it out, but when you're in the red zone, you don't really have a lot of space to work with. How's this team evolved throughout the year in the red zone, and then how do you see that as being a big key coming up?
It's certain instances of if they've got to stretch the field even in the red zone, they've tried to take those opportunities to do it, and it kind of goes back into the running game in the red zone. It seems kind of odd to say that, where it's simple as that. It's like if you got enough bounce even in the red zone, that's going to improve your chances of at least having a shot at a touchdown. But even going back to the South Alabama game, they were nearly perfect in the red zone. I think the only miscue was a Grupe missed field goal from short range, which has had a couple of those. I think that's going to be another key coming into Saturday with special teams altogether. But in terms of the red zone, you're absolutely right. I remember early in the season where, okay, if they're in the red zone, I have no idea what's going to happen. Now you're kind of getting more of a certainty. If they get in the red zone, they're getting 3 or they're going to get 7. Really good odds there. So another aspect is this is the right calls. Hanson's been able to make a quarterback just kind of as an example of kind of taking what the defense gives you and not being too aggressive in the red zone, where you kind of noticed even in the App State game, I wouldn't say red zone, but you had key turnovers there that would have stalled scoring drives there. So it's a combination of factors. I think Hanson's been able to take care of the football. The running game has been able to work not just on both ends of the 20, but inside the 20, where you really need the run game to kind of help churn some yards too. And then if it all falls short, having those opportunities there for a field goal trial, which I think Grupe will have another solid week in the kicking game.
All right. Big plays, obviously one thing we've talked about a lot all year. I think defensively they've started to limit some of those big plays like we saw earlier in the year. But this is the team that can be explosive. They have 132 plays this year of 10 or more yards, and 69 of those are running plays. Obviously, they're a little bit more of a running team, but again, it comes back to that misdirection, and I know eye discipline is going to have to be a key factor for the defense this year. But also Marcus Outlaw, one of the leaders in the Sun Belt in terms of running, 73 a game. That puts him 6th in the conference. He has 131 attempts on the year, so he's one of the workhorses in this league. But also, they'll hit you with a little smash and dash here. C.J. Marable, that guy's fast. He's got some wheels on him. Coming in just short of 64 yards a game. That puts him 7th in the conference with a lot fewer attempts, almost about, I want to say about 40% less than what Outlaw has. So they've got sort of a little two-headed monster there in the backfield, not to mention their quarterback play can be solid as, that misdirection can kind of get you going every which way and you can get your head turning. And we've seen this team sort of dice some teams up with those from time to time. I mentioned eye discipline. Is that really going to be sort of the key to limiting the big plays for the defense?
I think so. It's going to a lot of keys that we even went back to the Georgia Southern game are going to apply here, where defensive coordinator Joe Coughlin, one of his lines he says a lot is eye candy. Granted, you hear that a lot from defensive coaches, but in the case of A-State, it's granted we're not too far removed from Halloween, so we're going to see a lot of candy from the Coastal offense. It's just picking the right times to be aggressive and things like that, where even as far back as the Georgia Southern game, for the most part, they did a pretty good job of containing an offense that had too much movement to count and all kinds of things you just weren't used to seeing. And I think you're going to have to go back to what worked there against the Eagles way back when to have a chance to contain the Coastal Carolina offense. Now we already mentioned Raheem Bingham and what he could do.
Right.
I think it also goes back to that second level. Guys like Justin Clifton, he's going to have a big game there in terms of as the entire defense as a whole.
Yeah, and I think, too, as part of that, I think the linebacking core, who's been kind of beat up this year, and I know we've kind of beat them up a little bit ourselves here, Tajay Chambers kind of being the only real bright spot in that linebacking core. You know, what can we expect out of those guys this week? And, you know, I know they're young in that position and inexperienced as well, but what can we expect out of those guys, hopefully, in this one?
Yeah, you mentioned Tajay. I want to say he's getting on course to having his first full season with the Red Wolves, because he's been banged up quite a bit in his career, and he's certainly been one of the stars on defense this season. And he had a great performance against South Alabama, and want to see how that momentum kind of carries over into this weekend. And just having that, I mean, yeah, the first level, we mentioned how much the defensive line has been critical to A-State's success on defense, and you mentioned the linebackers being banged up. You know, Tajay's really held that fort down for that core on defense, and I think the secondary is going to have an interesting task as well.
Yeah.
We mentioned Jerry Jacobs, we mentioned B.J. Edmonds. I wouldn't be surprised if Coastal just kind of tries to throw it a little bit more than we expect, and how does the secondary able to contain, how are they be able to hold things down will be another key to this ball game.
Yeah, absolutely, because a lot of times they tend to get a little too aggressive, I think, for a lot of people trying to really step up on that run game. But it'll be interesting to see what they do, like you mentioned here. Let's take a couple looks at things from off the gridiron here. I know basketball is back. It's finally up and rolling here. What did you notice from this past week? I know there's a couple exhibition games, and the real deal starts up here in the next, I believe it's this week. It kind of really gets into the basketball season. But what did you notice from them in a couple of those exhibitions, both men and women?
Yeah, on the men's side, you're seeing a whole, Coach Bellotto has mentioned it more than a few times now, getting Ty Cockfield some help on just both ends of the floor, and just seeing everybody grow and develop. Marquise Eaton has played incredibly well in the Scarlet and Black scrimmage, and then both exhibition games, several newcomers, 4 or 5 new guys that should make an immediate impact. Zanbert Koos, guys like that are definitely going to play a big role in whether A-State can kind of turn things around, because we can mention it. Last year was pretty bad. There's only one way to go but up for the Red Wolves on the men's side. Women's side, they're going to score. You've got a lot of players there that, in terms of experience, in terms of Acacia Westbrook, you've got Star Taylor there, but even some of the newcomers, Jordan Elder there too. So the women are going to be able to score. Now it's just going to be a matter, can they hold things down? You and I know Boyer is big on defense, and being able to play, turn that defense into offense for A-State. And now it's going to be a matter, the first couple weeks, can they be able to do that? And I think Friday is going to be a good gauge for the men's and women's teams. Both teams on the road. The A-State men at Abilene Christian. The A-State women play at Oklahoma State. So we'll see if Boyer is able to pull off another upset against a Power 5 opponent.
He always seems to kind of slip one in there from time to time. And some other big news that came out this week, Melo Eggleton transferred from Wake Forest. He was a 4-star guy coming out of high school, had offers to a lot of big-time programs here. Coach Bellotto, he mentioned earlier in the year that I'm going to hold on to this 4th scholarship. Boom, there it is. So his patience definitely persevered. Just from what you know of Melo here, how does he sort of fit into things here? And obviously he kind of caps off what is a pretty big, in terms of physical class that Coach Bellotto's racked up here.
And that's, you touched on 2 big points there, big and physical. That's one of the things I've been taking away from, watching the exhibition games, and then I took in the Scarlet and Black scrimmage a while back, and that was one of the things I noticed, where they're trying to emphasize both of those keys, having enough size and having enough physicality, because you're going to need that in the Sun Belt moving forward, where you're noticing more teams across the board. It's not like that. It's not the guard-oriented league that we noticed a while back. Now you're noticing more, size and strength, and kind of stretching the floor on both ends, and, bringing a 4-star guy. That's not just going to help, of course, on the court, but the fact we're connecting a former 4-star recruit to Arkansas State basketball. We're used to hearing that on the football side.
Exactly.
We haven't heard that on the basketball side in quite some time, so it's a great coup for Bellato to be able, like you said, to kind of hold on to that fourth and final scholarship for somebody he needed and somebody he knew that could make a splash.
There you go. Key there, splash, and hopefully when he gets here, splashing them down here. Bowling also knee-deep into their season. They got third this past week in their tournament. I forget the name of it now, the Cat Clash or something to that effect. Bowling kind of gets slept on up there, but this is a power program, at least in terms of bowling.
A consistent top 5, top 10 program, just like the rugby program. It's just one of those sports that if you like, folks would think, okay, what's the one sport that or two sports that Arkansas State has been a consistent national program? Bowling and rugby. Golf is going to be that next one that
we've been talking about them
in the top 15, top 22. But in terms of bowling, we kind of know what's going to happen. Justin Kostick is going to recruit some of the best bowlers in the country. Yada, yada, yada. See in the NCAA tournament where they try to make a run at the national title. It just seems to happen that way every single year, and this year being no different. I expect them to make a run at the national title.
Should be fun to watch them going forward. Maybe this can be the year that they finally hang a banner. Chris, man, thank you for coming in here, brother. I really appreciate it. And where can the people find you? What do you got cooking up there in Jones Boogie?
Yep, find me on Twitter, Chris Hudgison, Hudgison. We're also on Facebook. Just search Region 8 Sports on Facebook. And in terms of A-State content, something that I brought back from my first stint here, Red Wolves Raw. We have all your Raw press conferences from A-State, extensive interviews that we do every single week. It's updated, 3 to 5 times a week. So we're going to upload more things. I think we'll have the coordinator press conferences. We'll have that up later today, so more A-State fans can kind of see what the Red Wolves are kind of working with entering this week against Coastal Carolina. And just head to our website, KAIT.com, Region 8 Sports app. There's just a million ways to kind of stay connected to the Red Wolves, and we try to have you covered every single day.
Absolutely. Not going to lie, I partake in the Red Wolves Raw. It's one of my favorite things that you did. And I missed it. When you left, it left with us, and then you came back, you brought it back. It's a wealth of information on top of that. So not only do you just kind of feel like you're connected to the program, you get a lot out of it. You kind of get sort of that day-to-day, that minutia, and like you mentioned, some of those little tidbits that maybe you don't always get in the broadcast here. But man, I do appreciate you coming on. We'll do it again soon.
No problem. Take care. Thanks for the time.
All right, brother. All right, so that puts a bow on this week. Again, Red Wolves traveling to South Carolina, taking on the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers. Make sure you say it right, because I get a little about that. And again, basketball's really starting to bounce back here. We'll start diving into them here in the next couple of weeks. And then this week, hey, bowl eligibility is on the line. Both these teams 5-4. Who's going to get it? And then where are they going to go? So start saving your money, kids. We got a trip to book here in the next couple of weeks. And then also still potentially an outside shot at that Sun Belt Conference title game. All right, guys, that'll do it for this week's Wolves Den. Make sure you tune back in here right again next week, fox16.com, Wolves Den tab. We will see you guys then.